thanks everyone for coming to our Sourcepass webinar series. This is our digital transformation webinar series, kind of focuses on the changing landscape in IT and how we kind of tackle it from the Sourcepass perspective. This one is focusing on modern IT for modern teams and how we integrate cloud, remote work, and security all into a single package, and how it can kind of help you and your business, and how Sourcepass can kind of guide and help you on that transformation and journey, because it is a complete journey when you're going through this, as you might be coming from a lot of legacy on-prem stuff that you've been using for 20 years, and we're guiding you on how to enter the modern workplace on this. This is our digital transformation series for September 2025, and we'll go ahead and introduce you to our team that's going to be working with you today. If you want to go to the next slide. As you might remember, I am Robbie Swiebel. I am the VP of Professional Services. I have 15 very long years in projects and implementations. I have seen, done, overseen, managed it all when it comes to the project world. That is where I live. That is what I love. When it comes to implementing new things and taking you from what you had to what you're going to, that is my joy and my passion, and that is what I specialize in. I have Colin and Ryan here, and they'll go ahead and introduce themselves. So Colin, let me know who you are.
Colin D'Angelo, Senior Solutions Architect for Sourcepass. I have had about 20 years in the industry, and work with the Sourcepass team and our clients to properly scope solutions and roadmaps for success.
Love it, love it. Ryan, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm Ryan Villar. I'm Director of VCAO Strategy for Sourcepass. My role here is to help to develop and refine our VCAO and assessment process. I want to ensure that the strategy or discussions that we're providing to our clients align with business goals, and as well that internally, right, the guidance we're providing aligns with how we solution and also deliver project initiatives. I've got 25 years experience in the field. I had much more hair on my head certainly when I started this, but have been very much using experience and data to drive, business planning to business outcomes.
I think the most common thing you'll see from longtime people in the field is that we don't have hair. I think that's one of the first things that's one of the things we all lose. But Colin, man, lucky man. Cool. Appreciate the quick introduction. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, just want to remind everybody, we will be continuing our digital transformation series. We do this every month. Be on the lookout for next month. Anybody from Sourcepass will be able to host these. We usually try to pick some of our more senior experts in the field, some of the people you don't normally get to talk to or hear from a lot, to kind of hear what we have to say and kind of hear a lot of the voices in the background, hear our thought processes, and kind of see how we talk through things. Also on a monthly cadence, Sourcepass offers webinars in our learning series with a focus on educating end users on how to use their technology and how to maximize what they're actually using and paying for to best benefit them. Some upcoming events, we're going to have Getting Started with Microsoft Loop. That is one of the newest Microsoft platforms and programs that's out there. They're really trying to integrate Loop into Copilot and how to use that effectively. Be on the lookout for that October 8th at 1:30. And then next up on our digital transformation series, you'll see the IT Compliance Essentials, and that'll be on October 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Be on the lookout for those webinars, and also go ahead and visit sourcepass.com/events to see all of the upcoming series and register for them. So really appreciate everybody being on the lookout and registering for those key events. All right, just some things on the agenda that we're going to go over today. So we're going to kind of start off and kind of bring you through the whole journey. One, we're going to go ahead and talk about the challenges of competing priorities when it comes to modernizing your workplace. Kind of our focus will be on maximizing security, but also having enough security to where you're secure, but also that you can work. Sometimes when you talk about security, there's a lot of things we can implement and go forward. And we want to make sure that it actually works for you. We're going to go ahead and talk about how Microsoft defines the modern workplace and how that actually works for your business and what you're coming from and what you're going to. A big thing, and this is where we kind of live here at Sourcepass, is what does IT cost on an average small to medium sized business? That's where we really try to guide our clients to maximize what's in their budget and what they can spend and how to use that budget appropriately to get everybody what they need. We're going to go ahead and talk about some common myths about cloud adoption. It is a very new space. It is a very challenging space, and it's an ever evolving space when it comes to cloud. And we will kind of guide you through how we think about it, what we talk about with our clients, some things that we've done, some things that we've recommended, and how they worked for our clients. We'll talk about some of the challenges of a remote workforce. Us here at Sourcepass, a lot of us are remote, so we even work in the challenges that we are working with our clients in, and we kind of walk through, hey, this is what we're doing here at Sourcepass, and this is working for us. So not only are we preaching what we are putting forward, but we also practice it as well. So we could talk through, hey, some of the things that work for us here at Sourcepass as well. We'll talk about the importance of IT assessments and roadmaps and how that really plays into the guiding your company on its journey. And we'll talk about some success stories of sequential improvements over time and how you can have an end goal destination and maybe how to iterate on how to get there along the way. Because maybe you don't have $100,000 on your budget right now, but you could split that up in chunks and finally get you on the end goal that you are trying to get to. Awesome. So we're going to start off with the competing priorities. Organizations face the challenges of competing priorities, often driving cloud adoption, facilitating remote work while doing maximum security for their company. It's a lot to juggle. And how do you prioritize those? So, Colin, when you're thinking about scoping these out and where clients are at, what they're trying to get to, and the security that they want, like what are some things you think about when you're scoping this out for clients?
Really, a big part of it is kind of borderless networking, understanding, do we need to scope the client where we assume the end user is working out of a Starbucks, where we can only secure the computer, or are we talking about a remote workforce that's working out of a remote call center, things like that. So getting an understanding of where the user lives and the type of data that is being delivered to their endpoint or their computer, and from there figuring out how to secure it.
Yeah. Ryan, can you talk me through some guidance that you've done with clients when it comes to trying to juggle these three priorities?
Sure, absolutely. So you're always weighing the, if you look at the scale on two sides of the scale, you're always weighing security and ease of user productivity, right? So you certainly can secure an environment or a remote workforce to the point that it impacts user productivity. So we've got to find that balance, right? And dependent especially on regulatory requirements that some of our clients have, you may look to a zero trust model, for example, to secure the endpoint. Versus being a little more lax there, right? Depending the business the client is in, et cetera. But this also balances with budget, right? So in an ideal scenario, we'll talk about budget more later in this webinar, but just have to balance costs there, what makes sense for the client based on their financial state, the economy, et cetera.
Yeah, I think Zero Trust is always an interesting one because, it's maximum security and it's great, but it also, you need to make sure that everybody's prepped for what that actually is and how do you navigate that Zero Trust world. So, hey, we're going to maximum secure you, but when you want something, yeah, you're going to have to submit a ticket and allow it through. You need to you need to prove your business case that you need to go to this website. So while I think it's super fun to implement for sure, it can be a challenge to navigate if people aren't used to something like that.
Right. These things also need complete buy-in at the leadership level, right? Because employees inherently want to do what's convenient to do their work, and that may mean not necessarily maliciously, but taking shortcuts, right? That would have risk to a company. So these things where they can be disruptive or require adjustment in workflow, you always want full buy-in at your leadership level, so that messaging is passed down that this is our direction, secure our company.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, because I mean you and I have been on projects where the leadership bought something, we implemented it, but it wasn't like really laid out correctly to the line level employees. So there was a lot of noise being brought up. Hey, I can't go to this website anymore. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of by design,
Right.
like that's what we were trying to do here. So that's a great call out. I totally agree. I'm gonna go on to the next slide. All right, so I wanted to talk about a little bit of a use case, and kind of what kind of got us thinking on this model here is had a client that was wanting us to implement maximum security, but not really understanding what maximum security meant. So I had to kind of go with them on that journey and be like, listen, if you want maximum security, I can make your systems almost unbearable for you to even use. Kind of going to Ryan's point earlier is like maximum security means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And without actually understanding what the security is, you might be disabling things that the company uses on a daily basis. And then, hey, now you can't even do your job correctly because we turned on so much security. So now we got to walk it back. This use case was this client said they wanted maximum security in their AVDs. I was like, cool, great. But I could put like a QR code right across the entire screen. And what does that do? Oh, that actually prevents people from taking pictures and then uploading it somewhere else. And it's like, what security is that? Like, that's preventing like IP theft type of security. Like, whoa. We don't really deal with any IP, but like, that's great. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the journey that I'm on with you, is like, you kind of want to know what your attack surface is and what you're actually trying to prevent happening in your company, and then we can kind of go from there. Colin, I know we've had some talks about, MAM specifically implementing it on clients and trying to protect them. What are some of those discussions you've had that are kind of like the same thing, where clients wanted some security and then you explained it and they're like, hold on, not that type of security?
Yeah, so a very powerful tool is mobile application management, meaning we want to manage the data on an employee's personal phone, but employees don't like agents or mobile device management agents installed on their phones because they think there might be some type of corporate spying on them. So with mobile application management, this kind of sandboxes the data into things like the Microsoft apps, yet employees, users, you get some pushback on this because, their contacts, their calendars, their email can't be used on the native iPhone apps, the Android apps. It all has to be done through the Microsoft apps. This protects the data, protects the user's data, but, you run into some hurdles with learning and, users not wanting to change.
Yeah, Ryan, what are some guidance that you've gone when it comes to security? Because I know you brought up compliance too, which is a totally different type of security. What are some conversations recently that you've had around this type of stuff?
So generally something we do always recommend, or mostly recommend, in addition to MAM, is also conditional access, right? And this is, think of this as, you have you want to have some sort of a written policy in place for how your employees use your equipment, right? Your workstations, access data, et cetera. But conditional access is the control, right? And so there you look at something, deploy a policy where, for example, you can only access corporate data from company provided machines, workstations, because you have no control over, users' home systems. You don't have control of what they do. The state of those systems can't secure them. So we use the Sourcepass too, right? We can't even log into webmail on a personal computer. It's got to be a company provided computer. And that way, between that and even auditing it, you might put in place around how data is managed within your M265 tenant, you have some controls in place there. So it's definitely a discussion that we've had on an ongoing basis in addition to the MAM discussion.
Yeah, I think the require Intune for access is always a fun one to implement. And I think it's like recommended for a lot of companies. I think that the challenge is, back to your earlier point, is adoption from key leadership is like, hey, you got to be used to not going to your personal computer, going to office.com and checking your email. So it's not only just a security change, but it's also maybe a workflow change and a habit change. You just can't go to the Gmail app on your phone and set up your work email. No, you got to use Outlook for it, and that there's controls in place. So I think there's not only like an implementation feature, there's a learning feature and a habit feature, and just like a total change of pace. Because I think even when I came over to Sourcepass for the first time, and we actually had those implementations in place, when we have new employees, they're like, "Oh man, what do you mean I can't access my email on my computer?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's the security that we have in place. We're SOC 2 compliant, and that's part of that security." So it's even fun to see like internal employees try to get used to the security that we have. But I also think that makes it easier in a sense to be able to talk about with our clients, like, hey, this is what we have at Sourcepass. This is our experience. This is what we had to learn. I think it kind of makes it a little bit easier to have those conversations with clients of like when you actually use what you're implementing, right?
Right. Here's where we're seeing some success too, is we're at a point in time where we're at the replacement aging for a lot of those endpoints or workstations that were purchased during the pandemic, right? And so we think about 2020, everything shut down at that time. Everyone went to the office 5 days a week. Very few people were hybrid, certainly, or fully remote people. And so many companies who couldn't buy equipment at the time, they had the person take their workstation home and work from home in that way, right? So now we're in a place where replacement aging is coming around, and many clients are shifting to full laptop models because it makes sense, and they could dock at the office if they're in the office. But then it more easily allows you to leverage something like digital access, right? To secure those systems.
I think that tees us up great for our actual next slide. So,
All right.
So, kind of basing off what Ryan was saying, what is modern workplace when we start talking about it? What do we mean when we say cloud adoption, remote work, security? Many businesses are embracing the emerging trend towards employees working remotely, driving a need to transform their network infrastructure to accommodate a distributed mobile workforce and people working around the country. And like Colin said, running into a Starbucks because you need to answer an email, you need to get internet real quick. This typically means moving away from traditional on-premise servers and legacy security solutions to a cloud-based model that leverages SaaS-based applications, cloud identity, modern security features. Microsoft defines the modern workplace as leveraging Microsoft 365 and Azure and Entra to empower employees to work securely from anywhere on any device, boosting productivity while bolstering your company's security and posture. So I think that kind of plays right into what you were saying, Ryan, with like when the workstations are getting replaced, like let's see about an Entra Intune project. And when we're replacing those workstations, we can actually enroll them into Entra and get Intune to kind of manage those devices. And then that way we get to take advantage of all the fun security features and say, hey, you can only log in on these devices and make sure that the company's email is protected. I know that we do a ton of those projects today, and kind of tip on the hat, we were actually got an award recently for the #1 cloud managed service provider in the country because we kind of guide our clients on this journey so well and we take so much attention to detail. But Colin, when you are looking at a legacy on-prem environment and you're like, hey, I heard you guys want to go to the cloud, what are some of the key things you start looking at from their old equipment on how do we make it into the cloud? What are some key things you check for?
Right. So if you're looking to move servers to the cloud, one of the big things is, okay, we move the servers to the cloud. How do we get to the cloud? Such as how do we access the applications? Do these applications work well over the internet? Some applications like QuickBooks and such don't work well over the internet. So then we start to think about how do we publish these applications? Do we need virtual desktops, VDIs, an application publishing platform such as Citrix? How do we get users access to the data? How do we securely get them access to the data without troublesome things like VPN clients that You need to sign in. How do we make that seamless? Kind of getting an understanding of moving to the cloud. How do we get there?
And I think that's it's always a big challenge because a lot of these clients have been on this equipment for 20 years. People have been using Active Directory since like server 2002. It's a lot of like technical debt that these clients have accumulated over the years, and it can often be a really big challenge moving these really legacy equipment into the cloud. Brian, what are some things that you talk about when you talk about moving them from this really old 20 plus years they've been on this on-prem equipment? What are some of the benefits that you talk about when you're kind of weighing the cost of staying on-prem to going to the cloud in this modern workplace?
Well, I'll talk first a bit of a counterpoint. I'll talk also to, sometimes it does not make sense to move an application into the cloud, right? So, cloud first really is the way of the future, where possible. But I think of manufacturing companies, distribution companies that have like legacy ERP application that lives on an on-premise server that doesn't have a path to the cloud. And when that's the scenario, then we think about, okay, well, how are we unifying on-prem Active Directory and M365, for example, right, to at least move workstations into the cloud, right? Because still they're at your site, at your offices, are still accessing applications that live on premise, but have the advantages of cloud first strategies like provisioning and updates and security, right? And still securing access when they're remote or where staff is hybrid. So it's a lot that we talk about, but we also factor in, can the app move, right? It's a core line of business application. Can it be moved? And if it can't, how do we make life easier for your staff to work remotely and in your offices?
Yep.
Yeah, I think
Who built the app 20 years ago, and how do we upgrade it?
Right.
Are they even still around,
Right. And even if you have an app that has support, right? I mean, anyone who's been through an ERP migration knows that it's a huge investment in time and capital. So even if you have the capital, you're talking about years to do this properly, right? So in that delta, how do we get you to a place where maybe your core file systems are in cloud and leveraging cloud SaaS platforms, but then we're still maintaining an on-prem application that'll move eventually.
Yeah, and I think Colin, that was kind of what you were talking about when it comes to like the VDIs and the AVDs and stuff. So maybe we can keep your whole workforce on Intune and Entra, but we actually have a back end that's hosted in Azure, and those servers are still using Active Directory for their authentication, but Active Directory is actually set up for hybrid authentication. So when they sign back into the ERP, it can actually still take advantage of the legacy Active Directory authentication, but when you sign into your computer, it's actually synced both ways. I know we've done a ton of those projects as well, and it's always a quite a challenge to figure out how to make the servers in Azure still communicate and work correctly with really old authentication systems, because there's just nobody around to do it. But I think it's still a way to get them in the cloud, but also not in the cloud, and it's a good middle ground from what you were saying, Ryan, like hybrid type deal. Cool. Let's go on about the myths of cloud adoption. So, myth number one, data isn't secure in the cloud. I think I've heard this myth a million times. Everybody's logging into the cloud, no big deal. I think that's a huge myth and a very big misconception that your data isn't secure. To kind of touch on what you were talking about, Ryan, like conditional access, like that's one of the strongest things that I think Microsoft's introduced in the last 15 years is the ability to say, hey, I can actually dictate where, when, how people can access my data in 365. I know I've had multiple projects where I had to like whiteboard out the conditional access policies because they were like, hey, you can access webmail only, but only in the internal network during this time. But any of the users outside of this group, they can access webmail anywhere outside of the network. And you can get really, really sophisticated when it comes to those conditional access policies, right, Ryan?
Yes, it can be very restrictive too, right? So it's always about balance for sure.
Yeah. And then, myth number two, the cloud is just a passing trend. I think the three of us on here are big proponents of everything 365 and Microsoft and the cloud. Just because we use it every day, but I think we also see the benefits for all of our clients of like, hey, your stuff's in the cloud, it's backing up all the time. Like OneDrive, for example, you don't have to worry about the documents on your desktop or on your computer being anywhere because guess what? They're actually backing up to the cloud all the time and making sure that your data is right there, secured, and that you didn't even have to go ahead and click Control S to save. It's actually automatically saving during your changes.
Mhm.
Colin, how long have you been scoping out cloud migrations for people? I don't think it's just a passing trend.
Definitely not a passing trend. I think it's been growing since I would say 2007, even before Microsoft had a cloud platform. There were several vendors that offered these cloud solutions where you're not buying computers, you're renting space on computers. Actually, I think it probably started all the way back in the 70s with mainframes. But yeah, no, it's been growing and growing over the past few decades, and it keeps continuing to grow.
I totally agree. I think myth number three, migrating to the cloud is expensive. I don't think it's as expensive, especially when you start pricing those out between cloud and on-prem projects, right, Ryan?
Right. The cloud has very much been commoditized, right? It is a commodity nowadays. And so this was a truth back at some point in time. It was expensive to move and to live in the cloud. It's not quite the case anymore. And what we're trying to communicate and forecast with our clients as well, beyond comparing on-prem to cloud, right? On-prem environments are more expensive nowadays. You have to buy hardware, and much of the licensing for any virtualizations become very expensive. For those who are in VMware environments, that license become very expensive, right? So we weigh the costs there, but also there's the liability of maintaining an on-premise environment and maintaining the DR solution, right, for that environment. So beyond cost, there's the time to do that, manage it correctly. I want to be sure that we capture all that when we have these discussions. But the barrier of entry that used to be there for cloud is much less so in place today.
Yeah, and I think there's also like different ways to get to the cloud that could break up your costs. I mean, I know, for example, you and I had a really big nonprofit client of ours where we said, hey, we want to get you to the cloud. We're going to get all your workstations in the cloud first. And that was what? A 3-year long engagement of them just continually replenishing their workstations, and every new workstation that we got, we joined it to Entra and had them Intune managed. And eventually, I think like after like 4 years, they replaced what 300 computers finally, and then we get to finally decom all their legacy equipment. And that was a very fun, long project for them. But we were able to kind of piecemeal it together and make sure that it worked for them and inside their budget, right?
Right. This also is a shift, right, from a CapEx model to an OpEx model, right? So if you no longer have the, every 5-year big expense for a new server project. You move it once, right? And then you have a very predictable OpEx model moving forward. So that's another benefit there.
Yeah. And so I think we can go to myth number four, which is we don't need the cloud. Our servers and network are just fine, which I think, Ryan, you just touched on that, right? What's the problem with that?
The problem there is certainly at the network layer. You just want to ensure that you have redundancy in place and high availability, redundant ISPs, right, at your locations, or at least where core infrastructure is housed or core people are housed. Um, uh, but beyond that, once you move to the cloud, again, it's an OpEx model, right, with very high uptime, right? These major cloud providers. So again, those risks of the past are they're not quite prevalent anymore, and you have a low risk of being in the cloud than you might have 5 years ago, even.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft's got data centers literally all over the world. One goes down, another one spins up. I mean, you can even create DR scenarios inside of Azure for the very rare event that this region goes down. No, no worries, this other region's going to get spun up and you're going to be okay. I know we have a lot of clients with really, really low downtime requirements because they do very, very sensitive very sensitive things, and they're like, hey, I literally can't be down. So what's the best way to make sure that I don't go down? I think, Colin, you scope the, hey, go to the cloud. Like, this is the most uptime you could possibly have, right?
Yeah, in the cloud, you're without even replicating to different regions, you're still on multi-redundant hardware and infrastructure that is completely invisible to you. Um, so yeah, you can add in redundancies. You can even go back up or replicate to an entirely different cloud provider. So, you have Microsoft and Amazon at the same time supporting you. You really have multiple solutions for redundancy, scalability, and yeah.
Yeah, I think I think the high availability of the cloud is really one of those key selling points, and really just nails that myth in the bucket, you know. And I think number 5 is a big one too. Myth number 5: the migrations take too long. We can't afford downtime. I think that's where like me and my professional services team really shine. Is we really make sure we walk our clients through every single piece of the project, and making sure that we are operating around our clients' schedules, and understand, hey, how do you do business?
Absolutely, right? And for us, it really starts initially at risk, right? What is the risk footprint of your organization? And what is downtime mean to your organization, right? Or if you think of a breach incident, it's not only, data exfiltrated, ransom paid, right? It's also really not relationship. It's also can't find my word here. Reputation. It's reputation, right? It's
Yep.
also, you hear about these large organizations, public trade organizations that have had a big data breach, and your data's been out there. You have less trust in those organizations. You may be less likely to do business with those organizations. So it always starts with risk, and then we want to ensure that your infrastructure is scaled, right? So your business needs, but also future growth. And that's Robbie's point, right? The ROI is there. Here's why it makes sense to go in this direction. Proactive investment is going to cost you less in the long run than reactive investment.
Yep, 100% agree. Um, if you want to go on to the next slide, I think this is a big thing to always keep in mind too, is that a goal without a plan is just a wish, you know? I unless you can actually map out and design and how you're actually going to get to that end state, you're just kind of hoping and dreaming. But I think that's where, the Ryans and the Collins working together and really understanding, what the business is, can really like design that plan, and then you give me the plan to execute on, and we nail that for the client, because we understand everything that they're doing and that everywhere they're trying to get to. And that really also helps us from the project perspective to understand, like, where's the client trying to get to. All right, cool, no problem. We can help them on that journey, try to find things that they didn't know that they needed. Um, and I think if you want to move on to the next slide, the regular IT assessment is what really helps the business. We identify hidden risks before they come costly problems. We validate, create, align, and establish all the things. Colin, what are some things that you look at when you're doing your IT assessments? Because I know you do these very regularly.
Yes. One thing I, really want to get an understanding of is, how do you want to pay for this big transformation of your environment? Do we like a capital expenditure model? Would you like things paid for monthly, annually? And then getting an understanding of these ongoing costs and offboarding costs. Once we have that understanding, we can start shaping the future state of this transformation project and this roadmap for the organization. And instead of one large financial investment, we can move this over time, doing the red flag or immediate areas of concern right away, and then slowly over 12 or even 24 months transform the environment. Have a plan for it, not reactive based. Especially for the financial stakeholders of the company, love to know how much money they're going to spend on IT next year.
Yeah, that's right, Ryan. And I think he touched on a big thing that I think you preach regularly is not be reactive, right? You want to be as proactive as possible when it comes to designing these, right?
Absolutely. And Colin stated it perfectly. I'll just add that, right, we want to also provide a predictive cost model to our client base. So, to Colin's point, you know what your spend is going to be, you know what's coming down the road, you know about things also that are external factors to your business that are going to force some sort of decision, like a Windows 10 end of life this year, for example, right? Not 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 an initiative that's been addressed because of necessarily we've had to do this year because of business requirements, but in this case, a major provider manufacturer saying we no longer support this infrastructure, you have to upgrade it, right? So that's also a factor in these assessments.
Do you think moving to the cloud also provides maybe a more stable cost alignment with the future because you kind of know what your spend is because the cloud is essentially just a monthly price, right?
Correct, right. It really gets you into a fairly predictable OpEx model. You move away from the more costly one-off CapEx expenses, right? There's no more servers to replace every 5 or 6 years. It's just I'm in Entra, I'm in SharePoint, I have my M365 licensing in place. With some variants here or there, some increases come every couple of years from those manufacturers. It's going to be a fairly flat cost, right, for the foreseeable future.
I think that just makes it a whole lot easier from a business perspective to really understand, what your costs are going to be 2, 4, 6 years down the line with minimal variance.
Right, right, correct. Yeah.
Well, I think we could talk about a client success story now. So this particular client wanted to modernize their entire tech stack over a 3-year period. Their industry was a produce distributor, very long time client of ours. They have about 200 employees, but those 200 employees have about 266 devices. So some employees have desktops on site, some have a laptop on that they take home with them and bring back and forth. So multiple devices for the client. Um, the challenge here was that it's a manual process. They have ineffective data workflows. They have outdated infrastructure. They have operational bottlenecks. And they have a ton of cybersecurity risk because of all these legacy processes, legacy equipment, and they haven't really changed their infrastructure in a very long time. So what we did as Sourcepass is we did the entire comprehensive assessment. We sat down with the client. We overviewed every single piece of equipment that they have, and we actually sat down with them and understood what their workflow is, which I think is a big key differentiator. Is not only does the hardware and what is use on site tell us about the client, but actually how they use that equipment tells us a completely additional story, where we can find the needs, and understand them. We brought down a cloud migration. We said, hey, you know what? We can actually integrate your ERP system into 365. We can actually go ahead and enhance your security. And we got our ongoing managed services. So if you have any issues, you have any questions, we can kind of help you along that way. One of the results that this client saw was with a lot of efficiency gains in how their employees actually interacted with technology. They only had to use one sign-in. They can do a click of a button and start accessing websites. The computers were a lot faster. They didn't have to go to 10 different systems. They were also now on compliance. They actually could meet all of the auditors that were coming in because they were a very big produce distributor. There was scalability. We can add in new computers when the workforce grew very quickly because things were now set up with autopilot. And deploying new computers took 10-15 minutes, just needed the user to sign in. They were now protected from future ransomware attacks. And I think this client in particular is kind of the story of Sourcepass and what Colin and Ryan and myself kind of guide our clients on. This is just one of thousands of stories that you have, right, Ryan?
Yes, absolutely. Very familiar with this client, right? And this was a plan built over a few years, right? In an ideal world, we can give you a plan and the purse strings are open there, right, to do it all, but that's not practical, right? So it goes down to what's your immediate risk, and then once we address that, how do we address productivity? how to make it easier for employees to do their work so you could ship product. And then when we get to the results, we're no longer talking about deficiencies in the environment. We're talking about proactive things. This client talking about generative AI and how to properly implement that nowadays, right? So it's a great place to be in once you work your way through the journey.
Yeah, and I think the managed services kind of sticks out too, because the employees aren't spending times putting in tickets, waiting for their slow computer to get fixed. There's increased efficiencies on that route to where, hey, we're jumping in and we're helping you with like an Excel troubleshooting at this point, and not that Excel can't even open. We're kind of guiding you through, hey, you could use Copilot to look at your formula now, and it's a completely different interaction with us and how our clients can even take advantage of us, because to Colin and yours point, it's no longer reactionary. It's a completely different engagement with us.
Mhm.
I think we got one more success story we can talk about. This client wanted another modernization over a 3-year period. And I think 3 years is kind of the sweet spot of like where the journey can take our clients. And what we really look at is that 3-year mark. This client was a private K through 9 boys school. They had about 142 devices with just 61 employees, but they had 641 email accounts because it was a school. So they had a lot of people coming in that actually didn't get equipment. This client had a lot of different systems previously all over the place. This one had Linux systems in it. They were all over the place. They had limited internal IT support for them. They had tons of security vulnerabilities. There was remote learning gaps as soon as COVID kicked in, and they needed digital identity needs. So they had no way to actually manage the identities in the system. So what Sourcepass did is we did a complete infrastructure overhaul. We went with all the cloud-based solutions, and we kind of focused with the cybersecurity in mind as well, because they are a school. They have tons of information about young adults and young children. And we wanted to make sure that we could actually do a device inventory and device management strategy with them and really understand, what do you have in this environment, and let's keep track of it and make sure we know where all the equipment is and who's using the equipment and who is it dedicated to. And we did a digital strategy support with them as well. Is how does this going to work for your school in the future? The results, again, operational efficiency, enhanced learning environment, strong security posture, improved parent engagement, and they were also future ready. So not only were they ready for today, but they're going to be good for 5 to 10 years. And I think this kind of just speaks to how we kind of want all of our clients to be at in 3 years, right, Colin?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. I know we're running out of time, so we could do some wrap up and Q&A. I think we got a couple of questions over here. One main question was, Brian, in your VCIO role, what is one of the biggest challenges you see with clients and their unwillingness to go to the cloud?
I think it's about dispelling most of those old myths, right? That's probably the largest challenge. Sometimes, some companies are reluctant to make large proactive investment, or they're used to again, a CapEx lifecycle model. So it's really talking through, here's what this means for your business. Here's how it's going to further enable your employees, right, to flourish and work more effectively, and dispelling talking through dispelling the worries of the past of, increased costs, and security, and then just the factor of not having your structure within your 4 walls, right? I think it's just talking through that stuff, probably our biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for everybody. But, if you want to discuss how to overcome that challenge and modernizing your IT, go ahead and make sure you reach out to your CSM, your client success manager. You can email us at events@sourcepass.com. You can email myself, Colin, and Ryan. I will answer every single email that comes into my inbox. I promise you, it might take a little bit of time because there's a lot of emails, but I will respond to everybody. If you have a question, never be afraid to reach out to Colin, Ryan, myself, your CSM, anybody at Sourcepass. We are always willing to help out any of our clients and any of our potential clients. If you have a question about how can we get to you, you're not a Sourcepass client, we'll go ahead and help you out on that journey. You can go ahead and scan the QR code to register for upcoming events. Ryan, Colin, appreciate this conversation. I thought it was great. I learned a whole bunch. I've really enjoyed working with you guys, and we'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much. This is fun.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.